माँ गंगे
गंगे
जय माँ गंगे
गंगे
जय माँ गंगे
गंगे
जय माँ गंगे हो
जय माँ गंगे जय माँ गंगे जय माँ गंगे जय माँ गंगे हो
हर हर गंगे
गंगे
हर हर गंगे
गंगे
हर हर गंगे
गंगे
हर हर गंगे हो
हर हर गंगे हर हर गंगे हर हर गंगे हर हर गंगे
ओ हर हर गंगे हर हर गंगे
गंगे
हर हर गंगे
गंगे
हर हर गंगे हो
हर हर गंगे हर हर गंगे हर हर गंगे हो हर हर गंगे
गंगे माँ
गंगे माँ
गंगे माँ
गंगे माँ
गंगे माँ
गंगे माँ
गंगे माँ गंगे माँ
गंगे माँ गंगे माँ गंगे माँ
हे माँ
हे माँ
हे माँ हे माँ हे माँ हे माँ
हे माँ
हे माँ हे माँ हे माँ हे माँ हे माँ हे माँ हे माँ हे माँ हे माँ हे माँ हे बोलिए सर्वेश्वर भगवान की
जय
गंगा मैया की
जय
भारत माता की
जय
धरती माता की
जय
हर हर महादेव।
ओम जय गंगे माता मैया जय गंगे माता जो नर तुमको ध्याता जो नर मैया जी को ध्याता मनवांछित फल पाता। ओम जय गंगे माता। चंद्र से ज्योति तुम्हारी जल निर्मल आता मैया जल
it is said, knowing one's self is true wisdom. Mastering oneself is true power. How do we achieve this? With the stress of our work and our family. So basically what it's asking is, how do we, with the stress and the strain and the difficulties of our family lives, bless you, how do we fulfill our spiritual practice? If we need to know ourselves and master ourselves, how do we do that? Well, first of all, the world in which we live, whether it's family, whether it's workplace, whatever it may be, these are not things we have to escape in order to have a spiritual path, but rather the spiritual path becomes, how can I know myself in the midst of living in the world? Because unless you're planning to spend your entire life away, living in a cave, you have to deal with the world. And whether it's a workplace responsibility or whether it's another type of responsibility, all of our lives have responsibilities. And so the spiritual path is not about pushing them away. It's about not identifying with them as the source of who you are. So for example, let's say I have a responsibility, and my responsibility is to, at work, my work responsibility is I have to be the one who is there first in the morning, and I'm the one who checks to make sure that everybody else is at their desk. I take the little sign-in sheet around and I make everybody sign it. Okay? Just imagine that's your work responsibility. You're the guy or you're the gal who's got to get there first. You've got to make sure when everybody gets there, they sign, and that you properly note what time they arrive. Great, no problem. Until the day that there is an accident on the freeway and you are stuck in a freeway that turns into a parking lot and you can't move. You can't get off the freeway because there's no exit for another 2 miles ahead. Can't abandon your car and walk. You're still 10, 15 miles away. So on a logistic level, and let's say this is in the days pre-cell phones, so it's not that you just call somebody else and say, "Acha, do my job." 2 ways of dealing with this internally. 1 way externally. Externally, you are stuck in that car. You have absolutely no other possibility or option. You can't move. You can't abandon the car. But internally, there's 2 ways of dealing with it. 1 way is, oh my God, I can't believe this. This is horrible. I'm going to lose my job. And you honk your horn and you yell at everybody. Maybe you've got somebody in the car with you. You yell at them too. You absolutely lose yourself in that stress. You lose yourself in the stress. That's 1 way of dealing with it. Problem with that becomes you have become your responsibility. You have become that role. But you're not that role. You are the one who plays that role. And right now you're playing the role of someone stuck in traffic. You cannot play the role of the guy collecting the signatures today because you're not there. Doesn't matter what magic wand you try to wave. Doesn't matter how much you honk your horn. Doesn't matter how much you swear and scream and sweat. And you cannot be there. You're here. But if you are over-identified with the responsibility, and I purposely chose something very simple and easy because of course it gets more complex. But it's easier to understand when you think about it like that. If I have identified as the one who has to be there early, who has to fulfill this responsibility, and then the universe has other plans for my morning, I lose myself. I've lost the responsibility anyway. There is no chance you are going to arrive on time. But now you've lost yourself too. Now you've lost the possibility of actually experiencing what you're here on planet Earth to experience. Why you actually took this birth in human form, which is to know who you are, not the guy or the gal who collects the signatures. It's just a role you play. It's a responsibility you have. And it's good. You should do it. You should try to be on time. But when the universe happens in such a way that you cannot, that you no longer can play that role, or you can't play it today. And it happens in so many ways. You identify as the role of husband or wife, then you get a divorce. Or your spouse tragically dies. You identify as the role of parent, and then your kids have grown up and left the house. Who are you going to parent now? So it happens with all of our roles, all of this. We identify with them so much that when it no longer is there, we become very, very stressed. Very, very upset. We don't know who we are other than the role. And this is where the spiritual teaching of knowing thyself is wisdom, which the question began with. Fantastic. Well, if you know that knowing yourself is wisdom, then whether you are fulfilling the responsibilities of a householder in the house or you're fulfilling the responsibilities in the work, you're still going to be focused on knowing yourself. But you're also going to realize as you fulfill those, as I said, that they are not you, and that therefore you need to also focus on actually what you're here for, which is knowing who you are. And so even in what we call the grihasthashram phase, the phase in which you're married and you have a job, or even in the phase before it, the brahmacharya phase, the phase where you're a student, whatever phase you're in the Vanprasth phase, in the sannyasa ashram phase, in any of these phases, whatever phase you're in, but it tends to be hardest in the have a family, have a job, bring home the bread phase. You need to remember, this is just the role I'm playing right now. This isn't who I am. And ensure that as you talk about and think about your daily responsibilities, I mean, if you say to most people, what are your daily responsibilities? Well, got to get up, got to make breakfast, got to do the dishes, got to get the kids dressed, got to get to school, got to bring home the bread, got to do this, got to do that. Well, there's also a responsibility to the self. There's a responsibility to knowing who you are. That wisdom. And so ensure that in your daily plan, in your daily responsibilities, there is the time and the space to be responsible to yourself. You're not only responsible for others. We spoke last night about who am I responsible to? Well, so you're not only responsible for putting a meal on the table, but you're responsible to yourself and for yourself. And what that means is that whatever situation I'm in, I need to be focusing on, centered on, remembering the truth of who I am, going inward, gaining that wisdom, remembering, I may be preparing food, I'm not the cook. I may be washing dishes, I'm not the dishwasher. I may be the guy or gal collecting signatures, but I'm not that. Means these may be the jobs I'm doing, the roles I'm playing, but I'm not the role. I'm the one playing the role. And that's the essential thing to remember. Every actor at the end of the day takes off his mask and costume, washes off their makeup. They remember, I'm not the role. We forget. We get up in the morning, we put on our mask and our costumes of wife, husband, mother, father, CEO, executive. But we forget that I'm just playing that role. This particular intersection of time and space, this act in my cosmic drama, this is the role that's been given to me. And I need to play it. I need to play it well for as long as I'm supposed to play it. But A, I don't forget that I'm the one playing the role, not the role itself. And B, I'm able to understand when that's no longer the role I need to be playing. If I'm identified as mother and my kids have grown up and they've left the house, for me to spend my energy and my focus on where are you? What are you doing? Have you had dinner? Have you had lunch? Do you have your sweater? Is it cold? Right? This is the stuff that drives people in their 20s and 30s crazy. Like, come on, for God's sakes, I'm an adult now. Don't ask me where I am. Don't ask me what time I'm going to come home. Don't ask me what I had for lunch. But this is when we can't let go of that role because we've identified so deeply as it. We identify with it in our grastashram phase, and we hesitate letting go of that, even though we know we need to move into the vanprasthashram phase, the sannyasashram phase. We hold on to the work. Because if I've identified as engineer, I've identified as CEO, well then even when everyone is telling me, okay, retire. You've had a great career, it's wonderful, but you know, your skills aren't quite what they used to be. Let the younger generation come up and take on the job. It's time to retire. But you won't let go. Because that's your identity. If I'm not doctor, engineer, CEO, who am I? If I've identified as the role as who I am, then if I stop being doctor, engineer, lawyer, CEO, whatever I may be, then who am I? And this is the wisdom. When we say knowing thyself is wisdom, that's the wisdom of knowing I'm playing the roles, but I'm not the roles. And that's the wisdom that we need. And then lastly, the power of mastering oneself. So looking for exactly what the verb he had used was. Mastering oneself is power. Well, we don't master ourselves for power, we master ourselves for freedom. And that's an important distinction. I don't master myself so that I can have power. The power is God's power. The power is the divine. Think about it. We've got here fans, we've got lights, we've got cameras, we've got microphones. We've got so many different vehicles through which electricity flows. But no matter how great this mic is, or great the fan is, or great the AC is, or great the camera is, it's the electricity that makes it work. The power isn't in the mic. You could engineer the most fantastic mic in the world. But if you cut the cord, it's not going to work. We saw it for a few seconds. The electricity went out. Doesn't matter how good quality our camera, mic, or lights are. No power. And so in our lives, as we focus on this self, mastering it, you have to remember, well, I master it so that I can be a clear tool, a vehicle, a vessel through which the divine grace can flow, through which that divine power can flow. But it's not my power. It's the power of the grace. And this is where that cord becomes so important. Whether it's a physical cord, whether it's a cordless mic that's connected through some other very impressive technological means that I don't quite understand. But whatever it is that's connecting it, you need something. It's got to have that connection to the source of electricity. And if you unplug it or cut it, doesn't work. And in the same way in our lives, that power comes from our connection to the divine. Power isn't going to come from here. Power comes from letting go, being a clear vessel, letting the divine flow through you. And when I let go, what I find is freedom. And that's what we master ourselves for, is freedom. Power will come, but it's God's power. And it uses you, like electricity uses the microphone. And that's beautiful. But it isn't about power. It's about freedom. And you can do that through your spiritual practice, regardless of which phase of life you are in or where you are. Because that's the inner work.